it's pretty clear that whoever is the next president is going to have to deal with some sort of US government debt crisis. And I'm concerned about how that response is going to be, regardless of which candidate wins. So, for example, Trump, in his case, when there was a major economic crisis in the form of, what happened economically as a result of lockdown policy and because of COVID-19, the person that he and his administration reached out to was Larry Fink of BlackRock, who implemented something we can get into later that some researchers have called the going direct reset, which was basically a way to put money from QE directly in the hands of the private sector instead of public entities, sort of like it had been done before. And arguably that resulted in a massive wealth transfer, and BlackRock didn't really use that money to help Main Street at all. They used it to buy shares in their own ETFs, among other things.
Imagine a world where the biggest financial players seem to always be one step ahead, predicting crises before they even unfold. Take BlackRock, for example, the world's largest asset manager with $10 trillion in assets. In 2020, they seemed to foresee the financial crash months before it hit. But how did we get here? In today's video, we're diving deep into BlackRock's role in the looming financial storm, exploring what their real plans are and how they could impact everything from cryptocurrency to government debt. You'll be shocked by what's coming next.
These guys essentially have a monopoly. Well, how big is BlackRock? $10 trillion. How big is $10 trillion? Only 2 countries have a bigger GDP than what BlackRock has, assets under management, US and China. That's how big BlackRock is.
To start, let's face a harsh truth that no one wants to admit. The US government's debt is spiraling out of control. It's become so expensive to service this debt that it's now outpacing the country's GDP, something that no economy should ever experience. The reality is, whoever wins the presidency in November is going to have to deal with this economic disaster head on. But here's the kicker. The outcome of this election, despite Trump winning, might not matter as much as we think. Why? Because the real architects of financial policy are already at play behind the scenes, and BlackRock is at the center of it all.
And then Kamala, in her case, her entire economic team is essentially led by former BlackRock executives. And that was also true for the Biden administration. So essentially BlackRock, which was also played a major role in sort of developing the bailouts in the 2008 economic crisis, which was under Obama, right, will likely be developing the response for whatever this coming economic crisis is, regardless of who gets in office. If we look at the policy actions of the people running, who they turn to in a time of crisis, or who is running their economic team, that seems increasingly likely. So that is why I'm very concerned, I guess I would say, about BlackRock in particular, because they seem to be the people that the government turns to, regardless of whether a Democrat or Republican is in office. And, they have sort of a history of really affecting wealth transfers during these crises at a time when, they're supposedly developing or helping develop policy meant to bail out Main Street. They end up sort of affecting massive bailouts for Wall Streets. And of course, the people that BlackRock are trying to generate profits for ultimately.
Let's back up for a second. In 2020, when the pandemic hit and the global economy plunged into turmoil, Donald Trump turned to an unlikely ally for help: Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock. Fink, who has been called one of the most influential men in the world, played a key role in shaping the US government's response to the crisis. In fact, BlackRock helped craft what some researchers have dubbed the going direct reset. This was a policy shift that took money from quantitative easing and put it directly into the hands of private sector entities rather than public institutions. It sounds technical, but what it really means is that instead of using government bailouts to help regular Americans, BlackRock used this money to buy up massive amounts of assets, stocks, bonds, and even their own exchange-traded funds. Essentially, it was a wealth transfer that benefited the ultra-wealthy while leaving Main Street out in the cold.
Essentially, this document was presented by BlackRock to central bankers at Jackson Hole. It was called Going Direct, is what they called it. And basically the idea was to have, what was generated via quantitative easing, not just go to like public of sector affiliated entities, but also directly into the hands of the private sector, i.e. Wall Street. And that was essentially what was proposed. And this begins to be implemented well before COVID, when the repo market goes a bit haywire at the end of 2019, and sort of continues through up until COVID was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization, at which point, there's a lot of calls between Larry Fink and Steve Mnuchin and other top figures and the economic team of the Trump administration. And then they begin to basically affect this policy, or really supercharge this policy and go direct even more. So there's a lot of, things that are happening in terms of economic policy that ultimately resulted in what we're dealing with now.
Here's where things get even more unsettling. BlackRock's power extends far beyond traditional financial assets. As we head toward a new crisis, many are concerned about the rise of digital currencies, particularly central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. These government-controlled digital currencies have the potential to be fully programmable, meaning they could be monitored, manipulated, and even seized by authorities. And BlackRock isn't just sitting on the sidelines. They have deep ties to the private sector digital currency world as well, including a significant stake in stablecoins, which are essentially digital dollars that are pegged to a traditional currency, like the US dollar.
And the other thing that I'm really concerned about as it relates to, a coming economic crisis is that I think we're going to see a major effort to saddle American consumers with programmable, surveillable money and seizable money. And so, of course, a lot of people for years now have been very concerned about central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. But there are also things issued by the private sector, like stable coins, for example, that are just as programmable and surveillable and seizable as CBDCs are. So I think it's very likely, in the event of a major debt crisis or some sort of crisis that damages significantly regular Americans' purchasing power, there will be an effort to onboard Americans onto one of those two versions of programmable, surveillable money. So it's possible, if Kamala wins, we could see a CBDC or something like that. But in the case of Trump, he's sort of come out in favor of stable coins. He did that recently at his speech at the Bitcoin conference earlier this year. And, stable coins are just as programmable and surveillable and seizable as CBDCs in theory are. And I think those, as people have rightly pointed out, are a threat to our financial privacy and ultimately our financial freedom.
Now, you might think that stablecoins aren't as dangerous as CBDCs, but here's the catch. Stablecoins are just as programmable, surveillable, and seizable as CBDCs, and in some ways, they're even more dangerous. These private sector digital currencies can be used to manipulate markets, including cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and BlackRock's involvement in this space is growing. One of the most prominent stablecoins, Circle, has a close partnership with BlackRock, and in their SEC filings, they've even stated that stablecoins could be used to manipulate the price of Bitcoin. This is troubling for anyone who believes in the freedom and decentralization that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and XRP are supposed to provide.
Incredible growth and adoption that is predicated on institutional players getting involved. Now, Fidelity, we know, had sort of pinned its horse to the race that is crypto and got involved in the space earlier. But it was interesting that, BlackRock, to a large extent, we knew was helmed by Larry Fink and himself, a little bit of a cautious cynic, dare I say it, of the world of crypto, but had started to write about the infrastructure play, the payments, the way in which it could facilitate trades. Is that really what's going on here, the use of stable coins? Why would BlackRock get involved?
Well, look, we're very excited. This is a corporate strategic investment from BlackRock. It's not investing their clients' money, it's their own money. And alongside it, a strategic partnership has been formed between Circle and BlackRock, which is focused on the reserve management model for USDC. They are a primary manager of the reserves that back USDC, which is really important to get institutional acceptance, for people to understand the safety, soundness, security of all of this. But importantly, this is about how are we upgrading the fundamental financial market infrastructure of the way dollars work in capital markets.
But let's zoom out for a second. The implications of BlackRock's growing control over digital currencies and the global economy are far-reaching. If there's another major financial crisis, we could see a massive push to get Americans into programmable money. This could take the form of CBDCs, or it could come in the form of stablecoins. Either way, this move would give a few select companies, like BlackRock, unprecedented control over your money. They could seize it, track it, or even restrict its use based on your behavior or political views. The erosion of financial privacy would be catastrophic, and it's something that most people don't even realize is on the horizon. What's even more alarming is that BlackRock is already positioning itself as a key player in the future of money. During the pandemic, when the US government was pumping billions of dollars into the economy to try and stave off a complete collapse, BlackRock was one of the biggest beneficiaries. The company used the money from government bailouts not to stimulate the real economy, but to purchase more assets, essentially consolidating even more wealth and power into the hands of a small elite. This massive wealth transfer didn't help regular Americans, who are still struggling with inflation and rising costs. Instead, it lined the pockets of Wall Street investors and giant asset managers like BlackRock.
I guess, debasement of U.S. American consumer purchasing power. But a lot of this money at a time when there were lockdowns and there was really very little economic activity going on, they're being given all of this, people like BlackRock asset managers are being given all of this money, and then they go, and instead of helping out Main Street, they go up and buy up all the assets. They buy shares in their own ETFs, for example. And basically what happened during COVID was a massive wealth transfer. And if you look at the statistics of it, the top 1% in the United States benefited hugely during COVID, but the rest of us did not. Maybe some people got stimulus in that, but a lot of the consequences downstream of those policies have resulted in this inflationary situation we're in and a lot of other, economic issues that people are dealing with. And so BlackRock sort of, I would argue, oversaw, these wealth transfers sort of, to the benefit of Wall Street and not Main Street. And it seems like, if there is another crisis coming down the pike, which it seems there is.
And if the coming economic crisis is anything like what we saw in 2008 or 2020, BlackRock will likely be the one shaping the response again. But this time, things might look a little different. With the rise of digital currencies and the push for programmable money, the stakes are even higher. We could be heading towards a world where your money is no longer under your control. Instead, it will be controlled by entities like BlackRock and their partners in the digital currency space, who could use that control to monitor your spending, limit your access to certain goods and services, or even freeze your assets entirely.
And, like with COVID-19, BlackRock anticipated the next downturn about a month before the repo market started going haywire and presented to central bankers, this is the policy you should implement during the next downturn. And it's very possible that BlackRock is working on policy papers, for central bankers or other people in the U.S. government about what policy should be implemented if, this type of crisis happens or that type of crisis happens. It seems like they seem to be designing the policies, I guess.
Now let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The U.S. government's debt is a ticking time bomb. The country is drowning in debt, and as the cost of servicing that debt rises, it's becoming clear that something's got to give. The question is, how will the government respond? Historically, in times of crisis, the government has turned to institutions like BlackRock for help. But what happens when those institutions are no longer working in the interest of the American people? One potential answer lies in the idea of tokenizing real-world assets, like natural capital. This concept has been gaining traction in recent years, with projects exploring the idea of tokenizing everything from land to forest to ecosystems themselves. By creating digital tokens backed by real-world resources, these assets could serve as a hedge against inflation or as a store of wealth in a world where traditional assets are becoming increasingly volatile. BlackRock has been exploring this concept as well, and some believe that it could be a solution to the mounting debt crisis. The idea is that these tokenized assets could be used to absorb the growing debt, essentially turning them into a form of digital collateral that can be traded and used to back up the US dollar.
You would have to have sort of these dollar stable coins in the mix as well, as a way to sort of absorb government debt. And even, these things may not be enough to absorb all of the debt that we have. And so there's these efforts right now, this idea of real world asset tokenization. There's this push into tokenizing what is referred to as natural capital or aspects I guess, major, like even entire ecosystems essentially, and tokenizing them and using that as sort of like, a store of wealth, of finite supply. So there's this one effort, for example, that's seeking to tokenize each hectare of the Amazon rainforest. And there's 750 million hectares. So there's a finite supply of this digital asset security that's tied to each hectare of the rainforest. So then you have something else that could in theory be used as a sink for this stuff too, because when it's of a finite supply, it's it's not subject to inflation, and so you can sort of mitigate the impacts of inflation by having this anti-inflationary thing because of its finite supply.
Let's dive deeper into the stakes here. Take a moment to consider what the middle class represents. For decades, it has been the backbone of democratic societies, a stabilizing force that supports economic growth, social mobility, and innovation. But in recent years, we've witnessed an alarming trend: the deliberate hollowing out of the middle class. Jobs are outsourced, wages stagnate, and the cost of living skyrockets. These aren't random events. They're deliberate moves in a larger strategy aimed at creating a society where financial stability is a privilege, not a right. Why would anyone want to dismantle the middle class? The answer lies in control. A financially struggling population is easier to manage. And here's where it gets terrifying. BlackRock and its allies aren't just betting on this future, they're actively building it.
You can't understand what AI is doing to them, and eventually, because of their dependence on AI, will become cognitively diminished and mentally unable, essentially, to make decisions for themselves without AI's help. And there's a lot of other indications, I would argue, whether it's UBI, which again is going to be for I don't think, the top oligarchs in Silicon Valley like Bill Gates and Reid Hoffman and Peter Thiel are going to be receiving UBI. I think it's intended to be for other people that aren't necessarily in that economic tier.
BlackRock's influence extends beyond financial markets. They've been acquiring massive amounts of residential real estate, outbidding regular buyers with all-cash offers. This isn't just about investment, it's about control. By owning a significant share of the housing market, BlackRock gains leverage over one of the most basic human needs: shelter. And if you think this is just about profits, think again. Imagine a future where owning a home is a luxury reserved for the elite, where the majority of the population rents from a handful of megacorporations, where upward mobility becomes a thing of the past and generational wealth is a distant memory.
There are many problems in the modern housing market, but the biggest one for Americans tends to be the price.
Prices rose 40% from the start of the pandemic.
In the final quarter of 2022, the typical U.S. home sold for a record-shattering $468,000. That's unaffordable for most Americans, leaving them to rent.
The housing costs are completely out of line with wages.
Some members of Congress believe Wall Street is a part of the problem.
What's outrageous is your tax dollars are helping Wall Street buy up single-family homes. You're subsidizing Wall Street.
Massive private equity firms like Blackstone and Pradium Partners have backed a relatively new breed of homeowner, the corporation. This growing industry buys or builds single-family homes and then rents them out.
What's particularly alarming is how BlackRock justifies these purchases. They claim they're providing rental solutions for younger generations who can't afford homes. But the reality is they're creating the very environment where homeownership becomes unattainable. And once they dominate the rental market, they'll dictate the terms: rising rents, stricter conditions, and no escape for tenants who are already financially strapped. Let's not forget BlackRock's aggressive push for ESG investing. On the surface, ESG sounds like a noble cause, investing in companies that prioritize sustainability and social responsibility. But in practice, it's another tool for control. BlackRock uses ESG scores to pressure companies into adopting policies that align with their agenda.
The guy running BlackRock is really the president of the United States. If we look at the kind of influence he's got in every industry, Joe. And he's like, well, I kind of feel bad. I'm ashamed that all the weaponization, the word, ESG is being used and all this other stuff. And Elon tweeted about the ESG. I don't know if you remember when Elon tweeted about ESG, saying the S in ESG is satanic. Okay? So this is a part where even a Charlie Munger who is Warren Buffett's partner, says, look, I love Larry Fink, but I'm not interested in having an emperor. Some words like that he said about Larry Fink. So,
as we approach the next financial crisis, it's clear that BlackRock is positioning itself to play a leading role. Whether through their influence over U.S. economic policy, their involvement in digital currencies, or their exploration of tokenizing real-world assets, BlackRock is ready to shape the future of finance. But the question remains, will they use this power to benefit the average American, or will they continue to enrich the elite few at the expense of the rest of us? In the end, the real issue here isn't just about BlackRock, it's about the future of money, privacy, and freedom. As we move towards a world where money is increasingly digital, we have to ask ourselves, who will control it? Will it be institutions like BlackRock, or will we, the people, have the power to take control of our financial futures? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the next few years are going to be a defining moment in the evolution of money and power, and BlackRock is at the heart of it all.
Like if you want to prepare for whatever's coming in the US or another country, it's a very individual decision, but I really recommend doing a lot of research. And if you plan to go to another country, please visit it before you decide to move there.
So what can we do about it? The answer might lie in decentralized ecosystems, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, XRP, and Caspa that exist outside the traditional financial system. These networks give us the opportunity to opt out of a system that's controlled by a small elite and take control of our own financial destinies. In a world where traditional money is increasingly programmable and surveillable, these decentralized systems offer a glimmer of hope. By investing in and supporting these technologies, we can help build a future where financial freedom is within reach for everyone. So where do you stand? Will you let the system control your financial future? Or will you take the reins and protect your freedom? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more thought-provoking insights. It's time we stay informed, challenge the narrative, and secure a future that truly belongs to us.